Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we're going on an adventure. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Beginner Photography Podcast. As always, I am your host, Raymond Hatfield, and I am proudly wearing my Dodgers jersey right now, even though baseball's been canceled for the year, essentially. I had lots of plans to go travel around from St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Chicago, Philadelphia. I said Pittsburgh, Chicago. Yeah, all these places to go see Dodger games this year. They're on my calendar. I was ready to go. Tickets were thankfully not purchased, but almost purchased. And, here we are. The world has played a cruel joke on everybody. It's really not a joke. I don't know why I said that. It's very serious. It's very serious, this time that we are in right now, when it comes to the health and safety of so many people. And it's amazing how quickly everything just gets turned upside down on its head, and we're no longer doing the things that we had either planned to or wanted to do or normally do. So if you're listening to this right now, all that I can say is thank you, and that I hope that this podcast can bring some sense of normalcy back into your life, and that it hasn't changed too much, and that you're doing okay, and that you're healthy, and that you're safe, and that you're not, if you're not, then I really hope that, you can feel better, you can get better, and I just wish you the best. But let's go ahead and talk about this episode of the podcast, because this episode is, something that you can't do right now. I record my interviews several weeks in advance, and in this case, I recorded this episode exactly 2 months ago. By the time that this episode goes out, 2 months and 5 days ago. 2 months and 5 days ago, it doesn't seem very long, but the world was an entirely different place than it is today. And today's guest is Pierre T. Lambert, who maybe you've seen him on YouTube. You probably have. I allude in the intro that by the time this goes live, he will have reached more than 150,000 YouTube subscribers. But as I just checked right before this, he has 182,000 YouTube subscribers from people who just want to learn about him and his adventures. So Pierre is a travel and adventure photographer. This is a guy who loves to travel, and now he just takes his camera with him to go out and shoot. And he really produces something very interesting in his work. And he obviously talks about the shots that he gets and how to push himself creatively, coming from a non-photography background. So his insight is really interesting, found interesting by a lot of people. So it made sense to have him come on the podcast. But what it is that he's talking about, travel and adventure photography, something that we can't do right now. We can't travel. We're not going on adventures that are too far. We don't want to stray too far away from our home if we can avoid it, especially in large metro areas. Pierre is, as you know from his YouTube channel, is from Chicago. Chicago's a large metropolitan area. Is often in New York as well, and then I believe Paris. So the man travels. So what I thought about this episode, and I thought, oh my gosh, should I even release this episode at this time right now, or would this be completely tone deaf? And I feel like where we're at, people still want to, we still need to remember that there is an entire world out there, and we need to take this time that we are in right now and slow down and reflect on what it is that is most important to us, because some of us are not at work right now. And if you're not at work right now, you're realizing, oh, wait a second, it is nice to be home. Why do I have to go to work? And maybe you're building up a little bit of animosity towards that job, or you have the idea that you wish that you could just go out and shoot and travel and do all these things. And I want this episode to kind of, if that's you, light that fire. Realize, oh, wait, my job can be done at home, essentially. So why can I not do this while I'm traveling somewhere else? If you can do your job behind a computer, you can do your job anywhere in the world. And not that not that Pierre did this per se, but if this is something that you can do, then I want you to think about that and start to move in that direction while you have this moment in time in history. So there is that. That is why I wanted to talk about this, because when this pandemic is over, we are going to, the last thing that I want you to do is to fall into the same routines if you're not happy with them. And this isn't, obviously a podcast about life, but if you want to shoot more, I hope that this episode can facilitate the idea of you shooting more and push you forward. Maybe even get some ideas on gear and backing up, all that stuff. So that again, when the time comes, you are prepared. So that is it. Oh, no, you know what? I want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out real quick to, and I'm probably going to totally butcher this, but I think it's Missy Sue 2 on iTunes for giving the show a 5-star review. Missy Sue, so nice. She says, you know what? I could be totally wrong. It could be, I have no idea who this is. Maybe it's MISYSU2. So I don't know. I'm just guessing that it's Missy Sue. Regardless, whoever this is, let me know who you are so that I can personally thank you. They say, beginner or not, every photographer will find something new in the Beginner Photography Podcast. The friendly, relatable, and helpful guests and the breadth of the photography industry can be overwhelming, but you can learn so many niches here. Very valuable information. Highly recommended. So again, Missy Sue, if I got that wrong, I'm sorry. But the point still stands that I appreciate you and I appreciate the review of the podcast. It truly is a fantastic way to help, especially right now when people are listening to podcasts because, most of their time isn't taken up by work or other responsibilities. So that really does help the podcast right now. More than it has ever before. And I don't know if you can hear that garbage truck, but I'm going to breeze past this right now outside this window. So we're going to go ahead and get on into this interview right now with Pierre T. Lambert. Today's guest is Pierre Lambert, a travel photographer and YouTuber with, by the time this interview comes out, we'll have more than 150,000 subscribers who follow him for his photography challenges and tutorials. Today, I'm excited to chat about taking better photos of our travels. Pierre, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for taking the time. It's a blast. I'm super happy to be here.
I'm excited to be here. You are one of those, if anybody watches any of your YouTube videos, you are very much a personality in the world of photography. There are a lot of people who can educate. There's a lot of people who get into the technicals of things. There's a lot of people who just focus on the theory. I feel like you cover all of it pretty well, and you bring this personality to your videos that it's clear why people enjoy watching you. So again, I'm excited for our chat here. But before we get into kind of the travel photography side of things, can you share with me and the listeners, how did you get your start in photography in the first place?
Oh, that's a good one. I got it sporadically into it through the years. So it's not like one day I woke up and everything changed in my life and I wanted to be a photographer. It kind of did, but it happened over years. When I was a kid, I remember playing with like a dark room when I was like maybe like 8 years old or 9 years old. It was showing us that in school and thought it was cool. And then we would go on field trips, and my grandfather gave me a camera. I used also a lot of disposable cameras, the one with the film that you had to wait for.
Oh, yes.
Never knew what you would take off, but I always found it kind of fun. And I always spent a lot of time looking at adventure books or looking at books around nature and animals. So there were tons of photos in there. And I guess that in a way I was like, oh, I can capture my own stuff, obviously it wasn't the same, but
yeah, with a disposable camera, that's difficult to achieve the same results.
And then a few years later, I got into I got an engineering degree, got into engineering, started working and traveling a lot. And one day it just like occurred to me that I actually made a lot of my decisions around traveling, meaning like the job I wanted, the company I wanted to work for, everything had to allow me to travel. And that's how I had kind of decided on everything. And the company I was working for was absolutely not inspiring me. I would look at managers who were older, and I was like, I don't want to be you. I don't want to be you. I don't want to be you. I'm like, all right, no one's inspiring around me. And I stumbled upon a book called The 4 Hour Work Week while I was working offshore in Africa on a
Mm-hmm.
boat, like in the middle of the ocean. It was very boring because we didn't have many operations going on at that point. And I received an email saying like, "Hey, is the 4 hour work week possible?" And I was working like 12-hour shifts, like night shifts,
Yeah, you're
sometimes day
like,
shifts.
no way. There's no way
I'm
this is
like,
possible.
what? And that came from my engineering degree school, like the, how do you call that, college, if you
Uh-huh.
want. My college was sending out that newsletter with that conference. I was like, what is that about? And then they were trying to discuss around that book. I was like, well, obviously I had to grab the book. I was in the middle of the ocean, so I found the PDF version and I started just reading through the book. And I was like, a lot of things hit me really hard where it's like you're speaking to yourself sometimes. But as long as you haven't seen it written by someone else, you always think those are either stupid thoughts or you just suppress them to forget them because no
Yeah.
one around you shares them. And then one day you discover that other people around the world do. So and then you're like, oh, wow, cool. And that got me thinking, what if I could do anything with my life? What would I be doing? Can I do something for myself and not for others, in the sense that I was building that CEO's dream, or like those shareholders that I had no interest. I didn't even know them.
Mm-hmm.
No one, no one cared about anything in the company, if you want. So I was like, well, that's not very inspiring. I want something better in life, something that is striving every day, that I strive for, and that makes me feel like I'm growing in a way. And I literally listed a bunch of ideas, maybe 50, 60 ideas, like
Wow.
anything that would go through my mind. And the theme that would come all the time was like travel and photography and a little bit of engineering related stuff towards aquarium, for example, aquarium filters, because I
Mm-hmm.
was into like aquascaping it back in the days. And I was like, okay, let's circle the ones that are the most important and the one that I would actually consider doing, or maybe I want to look into. And so the three main ones came: aquarium filter, a platform to book photographers online, and like booking.com basically.
Yeah.
And another one was me being a photographer. And I was like, okay, let's just go through the list and try them. And so I tried the aquarium filter, and it got nowhere. It was good creative exercise though, and like just trying to dip my toes into how to launch a product, or just like anything. And I just killed the project, and I was like, you know what, photography is way more exciting to me, and the platform for photographers is very exciting. So the day I decided I would become a photographer, I looked into how it would work, and how I could make money. And I was like, oh, National Geographic photographer sounds great. But I also realized it's not the easiest path in a
Right.
way. It's a very long path, and you need to be in the right environment, which I wasn't at the time. So I thought, why don't I just look into portrait photography? And I was always super shy. I never dared taking photos of people. If you asked me to take photos of others or like of the family, I would get like, you're not like happy to do it.
Yes.
So I decided, you know what? There's money to be made. I'm in Paris when I'm not traveling, and there are a lot of people who travel here or who need the engagement shots, who propose, whatever. Like that could be cool. So I just started gathering all the resources I could find, and then I just like learned every single day whatever I could, and then practiced it. And that's how I started.
Okay, so a few follow-up questions for you. The first one, let's start with kind of where you ended right there. At what point did you leave your engineering job? Like, were you already somewhat established as a photographer before you did this, or did you make the leap before any of it was proven, I guess?
No, I did not leave before anything was proven. That would have been reckless from my end. Just because I needed
Yes,
the financial
yes.
stability, and just because tomorrow you decide to be a pilot racer doesn't mean you're gonna make it, or
Hmm.
anyone's gonna be interested. So you might want to try out driving a few cars really fast first. So what I did is I learned as much as possible, and I looked at photographers who were already established in the market. So I did a little bit of market analysis: who is showing up on Google, who is like getting clients, and that portrait and wedding space. And then I would basically look at their work and rank them in my head 1 to 10. And I was like, okay, this guy's really good. He's charging a lot. This guy is like, nah. And he's charging a little less, but not that much less. And then so I looked at what was average in terms of market, and then what was like average plus, between average and super high end. And I was like, I want to be in that range.
Yes.
Because then I have to work less hours, but I make more. So I was like, that sounds better. And also creatively, I still think that the more, in a way, there is a limit. Actually, it's like a curve like that. There is a sweet point where you're like high end, but not too high where you're working with celebrities and have no creative direction. You're just like high end. People want your creative direction, and that's actually really cool. So anyway, I looked at those guys and I was like, my work has to be as good as those guys, and then I can charge. And so I did everything possible to practice and get there, shooting for free, asking friends of friends, asking my wife. Yeah.
Where did you learn photography? I know that you started off and you just enjoyed taking pictures with digital or with disposable cameras and looking at images, but where did learning of portrait and engagement photography come from?
That came from my progression curve in photography started a little bit before I got into the idea of becoming a photographer, because I always would travel with a Canon 450D back in the days. So like a Rebel something, like the 2013
entry level camera,
or 2012 version with the entry kit lens, so the 1855, and I had also a 7300, which was great, really fast lens. And I would travel with that, and that was awesome. But obviously, my photos wouldn't end up as good as the others. So I started like digging a little bit more, and I did my first beginner mistake, and I thought my camera needed to be upgraded. Obviously,
oh yes,
so
yeah. That's where we all start.
I know. So I bought a Canon 5D Mark II. I think maybe it was secondhand, that one. And then I bought a 50mm 1.8. I bought a 1740mm. And then my photos changed already. Just having bokeh in my shots was like, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And the wide angle also was just so fun to shoot with. So I was keeping that and then didn't go anywhere. And the moment I really decided to work with clients, I had to step it up. And that's when I dug into like online resources. My dad had like old books from the 80s on photography, and composition didn't change that much since. So
that's true. Yeah.
So I just read everything I could, started watching. There was no YouTube video at the time. There was nothing free in a way that would teach you anything outside of Photoshop or editing. Like if you wanted to learn like photography as a business or shooting people, you had to go into paid resources. So there was Creative Live that was kind of getting up there. And I remember Creative Live was a good one. I would watch the lives back in France with the jet lag. It was like 3 a.m. during the week. And I was like, oh no, I can't miss that. This is so interesting.
That's
taking
dedicated
notes.
right there.
I know. Well, I had the daytime job, so I couldn't like do everything at once. I had to do it at night.
Yeah.
And so there was Creative Live, and then I can't even remember. Like there was sometimes like photographers that would pop up with their own course or blogs, but that was pretty much it. I remember I owed a lot to their like classes at the time because it was really good and in depth.
So why do you think, because obviously there's still a lot of online resources, there's a lot of photographers who have blogs now. Why do you think you were able to, I guess let me rephrase that question. With a lot of photographers with blogs and a lot of free online education, how come everybody doesn't make it? How come you think that you were able to break past this barrier of just being a hobbyist and really grow as a photographer?
That's a good question. I think people that fall in love with ideas, and they fall in love with the idea of becoming or doing something, but the moment you really have to do it, you quickly become disillusioned in a way where you're like, oh, that's a lot more work than I thought, especially when you're hitting the marketing part. Let's pretend you just got good at photography. And now what? Right? It's like, all right, cool, guys, I'm good. Well, I mean, people are not going to just find you out of the bush, you know.
Yes.
You gotta be out there, you gotta do your own marketing, you gotta find clients, you're gonna like put yourself out there to get those clients. And I think a lot of people might struggle with that part, especially. So more like the business part. And also getting really good, especially working with other people, requires you to be very humble, in the sense that you're going to be working with people, and you might suck completely at it and they will see you suck at it, right? It's not like you're going to be a
Yes.
landscape photographer and hide in the landscape for like 6 days and no one will ever see those photos. Here you're literally working with people and they're like, can I see the photo? You know. And if those are models that work with good photographers before, they'll probably think, well, that's pretty crappy. But that's your learning curve and you need to go through it.
Hmm. Yeah, you just gotta do it. You actually have to just go out there
Yeah, suck
and
it
do
up,
something. Yeah.
be humble, like put your head down and just work.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So when when you first started like taking it seriously, when you said, okay, I need to learn this as a technical skill as much as it is the creative abilities, I need to harness this. What would you say was the hardest aspect for you to learn or grasp or fully understand? What was the hardest part of photography for you at that time?
I think the hardest part was being able to do, or like, it's like you see a lot of different puzzle pieces and you understand each one of them individually, but when you're supposed to bring them together
Hmm.
to get a photo, that's when everything would collapse. It's like you would get your exposure right, but you forgot the composition. Then you got the composition right, but then your exposure was wrong. And then you got composition and exposure, but your subject was not ready, or you didn't communicate to them, or
Yes.
it just looked terrible. And then there's the editing part where obviously when you start, you overdo everything. So everything looks too much. And you're like, well, I don't understand. This one looks so crisp and good. My photos don't look as good. So I think that part, like being able to balance everything and really bring it together in a situation where you're under pressure, was a little bit difficult. That's definitely the steepest learning curve, and that's why I think learning and breaking down things and being able to train without your camera also really helps you. Like when you're in those situations, put everything together easily. At least some parts of it, everything that's not linked to the camera, composition, light, subject, communication, you can train without your camera, and then you just bring it in. It just becomes almost second nature when you're back with your camera, and you can focus just on the technical aspect.
Hmm. How do you suggest we practice lighting in composition without our camera?
That's a lot of observation, I would say. It's just being aware of what you have around and understanding how different sources of lights actually help you, or actually work against you, depending on what kind of result you're trying to achieve. Being able to understand when you look at other photos, how they've been lit up, what light was important, and that you can just do it anywhere. You know, you're looking at our videos, you try to pinpoint the sources of light around you, why it was set up like that, what kind of mood it creates, and then you just play. You move people around, you move your hands, you move objects. If you're shy, just use stuffed animals. You know, it's
Yeah, absolutely. Or mannequins. I've seen mannequins before. Yeah, those
right.
modeling heads. Okay, so again, it just goes back to just putting in the work and not just
Hmm.
doing more than just reading about it or watching it, but actually doing it, actually
Well,
putting in the
yeah, I
time.
mean, it's like abs, right? You
Yeah.
can read all day about abs, nothing's gonna happen.
You know, trust me, I know. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All day, not a single thing, not a single thing. So let's go back to where you were. You were shooting weddings, you were shooting portraits. Uh, Today, are you still shooting any weddings or portraits?
No, I don't shoot weddings anymore. I shoot portraits, yes, but not at all in the same context, where it's going to be either lifestyle portraits with friends,
Hmm.
or like influencers, or it's going to be portraits for like corporate sometimes, but and more like towards video, like it's a mix,
Yes.
but not like I used to, where it was like engagement portrait, couples, families. Those were really fun, but I moved away from that, especially after I moved from Paris to New York. My clientele was in France. Then I didn't restart trying to find clients in New York. I kind of switched gears. So
let's talk about that. Was that a conscious decision to not try to book any more weddings once you moved to New York, or was that out of necessity?
Yeah, no, it's when I moved to New York, I didn't know exactly how it would work out in terms of work and authorization and everything. I didn't want to put in the time because I was also so while at the same time I was becoming a photographer and learning, I also learned to code, and I built that platform I was talking about earlier, which was for booking photographers online. So I built a full-scale worldwide booking.com for photographers, and I was working a lot on that end. And when I moved to New York, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna focus my energy on that part and not the individual shoots right now.
Mhm.
I'm gonna try to scale it a little bit higher, and like bring in more work to other photographers, and those are in Europe, back in Europe.
Gotcha. So when did you shift away to that and start focusing more on travel photography?
So that's when we decided. Well, so the fun part is that travel photography has been all the time.
Yes.
So anyway, I have a very deep desire for travel, and I have the travel bug, and I cannot not travel in a year, otherwise I just go crazy. So I would travel regardless, like maybe 3 times a year or 4 times a year, and always take my camera with me. Sometimes I would do shoot actually with clients, for example, in Taiwan or in Seoul, where I had a wedding, stuff like that. But really got into the travel photography when we decided to go on the world tour with my wife. After New York, we decided to leave. We took a few trips. I shot for some NGO in Nicaragua, and then we went to Mexico, a bunch of places. And at one point we're like, why don't we just take a year off? And I mean, not for me but for her. And I
Yeah.
was just gonna focus on more travel photography and YouTube.
So then was that kind of the I don't want to say the end goal, but at that point were you thinking like, you know what, this is where all of my focus kind of needs to be? Like what am I trying to ask here? This is going to be a YouTube question because obviously you put out a lot of content on YouTube.
Yeah.
You put out a lot of helpful and educational videos. Was that the goal from that point when you guys were in, say, Mexico and Nicaragua, thinking, why don't we just take a year off and I'm going to focus on this? Was that the plan?
Actually, no, because I had another YouTube channel where it was more like a vlog, and we were just doing travel content,
Mhm.
meaning like information, showing how it was traveling those places, etc. But 6 months into it, I was shooting in this beautiful location, like getting shots I really liked, and more I was like, I want to share that with others. Like I get really excited about the photography on the channel. We don't really talk about it, just because that's not who the people are watching, what they're watching for.
Yes.
And was like, you know what, I think I can do something good with the photography side on YouTube. And at that time there were a few photographers on YouTube that started rising up. There was like Peter McKinnon that just started in November, I think 2017. There were like a few others, and I was like, I think it's a pretty good time to get into it. And especially because I'm traveling all the time, I want to share that with others, and I'm sure other people would get excited. So that's when I decided, and I actually started taking action, I think in March or February 2018. That's when I dropped the first video on that channel.
Yeah, your growth has been pretty consistent, which has been awesome to see. As I said in the beginning, like it's great to see that, or it's clear to see why people I think enjoy watching your videos. You just bring this personality to it, and as you said, you were traveling the world, and you really like the photography side of things, but it was hard to share it
Yeah.
with the viewers of that channel. So then let me ask this: when it comes to a portrait, when it comes to a wedding, when it comes to a landscape, when I say those words, I can visualize those images in my head. What is different about those than, say, a travel photo? When I say travel photography to you, what's the image that pops into your head?
I'm gonna ask you the same question after. When I you say travel photography, there are two kind of images that pop in my head, like charismatic guy or worker somewhere in an exotic place, like very like a face that shows you like years of work.
Yes.
That's what shows up in my mind. And another one is also adventure, where it's like maybe a small road with a car or something, and people like literally going through a journey in a very very different place from where you are right now. And that's kind of what I see when I talk about travel photography, that mix between adventure and people.
The mix between adventure and people. Oh, I love that. I got to write that down. The mix between adventure and people. Because ultimately, I think when people travel, they're buying into the idea that they're about to have an experience, right? And
Hmm.
that's what they get excited for. So when you go on these travels, as you said, the people are a
Yeah.
big part of what makes a location unique. And I don't know about others listening right now, but I know that personally I get nervous. And as you said earlier, you got nervous as well, just at the idea of taking,
Yeah.
a stranger's portraits. So now, with the experience that you've had, do you have any tips on photographing strangers?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, that's something I'm gonna be talking about at Photokina. So,
Oh, very cool.
yeah, I was like, oh, I think that's a good topic. Because I went through that journey where I would never like take a photo of someone, or I felt really afraid or ashamed or anything, even if they were your clients. I mean, not client, but like even if you were training with someone who was like a model for your day, to shoot.
Hmm.
I was very much shy, but one day I either watched a photographer work, or I think I was at the workshop, and that photographer was basically sharing that if you want the result, if you want it to look good, you have to be involved in it, and you have to be able to get the best out of people, and show it to them. If something excites you about them, just let them know what excites you about them and why you want to take their photo. Obviously, if it's something you think is just like drama, maybe don't point it out, but or don't take their photo because it's not that cool. But um, but when you're doing travel photography or street photography, the most important, I think, is to go in with an open mind and always remember that you want to approach people the way you would love to be approached,
Mm-hmm.
right? So imagine you're sitting in your shop and you're in God knows where. Like imagine you're in Indianapolis and there's this guy from India and his first time in the US, and he's a travel photographer, which is the same thing as me going to India and seeing a guy
Sure.
in the shop, right?
Yes.
Think about it. And the guy comes in with like a kind of frowny face, doesn't know what to do, and like kind of like sneaks. You don't know if he's trying to steal something for you or if he's taking a photo.
Yeah, yeah.
Or you have that other guy that comes in with a smile and says, I love your shop, or I think those colors look really great. Can I take a photo? You're more likely, I think, statistically speaking, to say yes to that guy versus the first one, if he even asks for it. So I'm like, can I have every time I talk to someone and leave, is it possible for me to leave them with the day better than it was before they interacted with me? Can
Hmm.
I have a positive impression on them that makes them have a better day? So that's kind of my goal every time I shoot people. Um, just because I don't know, it feels nice to make people feel good. So the best thing you can do, just compliment them on something. Find something. You have glasses. I would say, dude, I love your glasses, how it makes your eyes pop. Can we take a photo of you? You're already smiling.
Yeah,
See,
yeah.
it's I have won the game. Uh, and if you're able to say that, 100%. And there's gonna be a video actually that's gonna drop maybe next week or so. We did a challenge with a friend in New York, and we had 10 minutes to shoot as many strangers as possible and ask them.
Oh, wow.
And my friend did great, but we analyzed after, and every time we would get yes, it's when people, we would tell them why we wanted to take a photo of them, not because we're doing a challenge. That's not a good reason. Why
Yes.
for them is there an incentive to have that photo taken? Because you find that their haircut is cool. You find something's cool about them. Something looks good on them, or the light looks beautiful, and you think they just enhance the background or whatever. You know, every time you can find something cool about people and let them know, you're gonna get a lot more yeses.
Jeez, I'm trying to think right now. Oh, that definitely makes things a whole lot less scary, especially
Yeah,
when you approach it from that mindset instead of like, hey, they have something that I want. I wonder if I can get it from them, which is like their likeness. But
Yeah.
instead, how can I make this person's day better? And then in return, hopefully I can get a photo out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes it a whole lot less scary. I would imagine that doing that 10-minute challenge to get as many portraits of people, I feel like that would be a tough thing to do because you almost don't want to just take somebody's photo and then like run away and then get somebody else's photo. You almost want to like spend time with them for a moment and try to, I don't know, enhance the photo or like you said, just kind of talk to them and make their day better. I'm excited for. I'm sure that that will be out by the time this interview goes live. So if it is, I'm going to take the link and I'm going to put it in the show notes. So if you're listening
Cool.
right now, it's in the show notes. Check it out. That's great.
But yeah, think about it. How long does it take for someone to have a positive or negative impact on your day?
Seconds.
Right? It's
Yeah.
like a girl passes by and smiles at you. That's enough, right? But then someone cuts your lane and then you're angry. So it's as fast, in both direction.
Not me. I used to get angry about stuff like that. I and then
It's
I moved to LA and it was just like this happens all day every day. Like this is just life. I got to get over this. Yeah.
normal.
It definitely made me a better driver after that. Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. It only takes seconds. It only takes seconds. Um, gear. Let's talk about gear for a moment because we don't really talk a lot about gear on this podcast. As a camera or a lens isn't what makes a photo great. It really is the photographer, and it's there's so much that goes into it. But when it comes to gear and when it comes to traveling, it always seems like if somebody in the beginner photography podcast Facebook group is traveling, there's always a question about gear. How much do they need to bring?
Mm,
Because the question is we all want to capture it all, right? When we travel, we
true.
want to capture the entire experience, but we also don't want to get bogged down by the amount of gear that either we have and we don't want to bring it all. So do you have any tips for facing this dilemma?
Yeah, I'll have two tips. Take the lightest gear you have. That's my number one,
That's a good one.
because you'll hate the rest. And second, just go into your Lightroom or whatever software you use and filter by lenses you use and look at the lenses you use the most. And if that matches your favorite photos, then just take that lens.
Mhm.
That's a good tip whenever you want to switch gear or whatever. Just look what you shoot most with, like if it's 18 millimeter or if it's 55, or if you're someone who loves to shoot wide all the time. You got to know that it's very important, and that really will help you when you're out there traveling. And the last thing is, the more gear you have, the more question you're going to ask yourself. But if you only have one lens, if you have maybe max two lenses, and one's really wide and one is a 85-1.8, for example, you might be like, okay, today I'm just gonna be like taking portraits or having fun at 85, and then you're gonna put that on and forget about the rest,
Mhm.
and that's gonna be really fun. Now, if you're shooting, for example, really wide, then you do a really wide day, and try to not have to change lenses all the time, because that will take away from actually shooting and thinking about shooting.
Yeah. Yeah, that can be a hard thing though, because kind of, like I said, it's like we want to capture it all. And I think when you first start to learn photography, there's just so many options available. The
Yeah.
idea of using all of your gear is almost you almost equate that to being able to use all of your knowledge, you know?
Yes.
So if you can't bring all your gear, you almost feel like you're leaving your knowledge or the potential behind, and that can
True.
be harmful. But when you come at it as a challenge, kind of like you said, just do a wide day, just do a portrait day. That does make things easier. Well, what about things like now this isn't necessarily like DSLR or mirrorless camera, but things like a GoPro or a drone. How important are these things when you travel?
Well, GoPro and drones allow you, in my opinion, to get different angles, like different field of views, different types of experiences. So, for example, GoPro, you're going to have something very immersive, and then your drone is going to help you get settings.
Hmm.
It's going to show you where you are, it's going to give context to the place you are, it's going to help people understand better. And so, if really you're trying to go and capture a whole the whole experience, you want to have tight shots, you want to have detail shots, you want to have people, you want to have the general area, like show giving context as to what the landscapes looks like and the area. And then you want to have maybe the immersive experience that the GoPro gives you of being like in the action. And I think those are like, think about them as different lenses. That's all they are. They're just tools to help you like create a homogeneous vision, if you want, into your work. And if you're doing ever editorial, that's what they look a lot for, is not just one type of focus. Is they want people, they want setting, they want details on what people are using, for example, what their how their life looks like from detailed perspective. And then they also want the zoomed out picture that shows you the whole context.
Yeah, I think that you just breezed over something that is more important than you could possibly imagine, which essentially what you're saying right there is that you need to learn how to tell a story when you're traveling. It's not just about
Yes.
one photo.
Yeah.
It's a whole story that you're trying to capture.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to tell them because w- I'm sure a lot of people talk about stories, and I remember when I was a beginner, it was very difficult to understand. I'm like, well, everything can tell a story, and nothing can tell a story, you know. And, but that's the truth. It depends how you see it, how you want to portray that, and what matters is how you see things and what you're gonna do to actually make your viewer get it. You know, are you gonna focus on details because you're trying to show something very detailed, or a worker and you want to show how difficult his work is, so you want to like focus on the traits on his face and his hands or whatever? Or do you want to show the craziness of a city, and then you don't need to go as much in the details as for the worker, for example? And I think as long as you know what story you're trying to tell, it's going to help you get those different types of shot and make it match. So GoPro, just to wrap up, GoPro drone, just another tool that you definitely want to use for your higher creative vision, if in a way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Also great toys, by the way.
Yeah. Very fun toys. When um so let's say, do you have any travels coming up soon that you'd be happy to share about?
Yeah, I'm gonna be in San Diego. I have no clue what's gonna happen, but I was supposed to be going to Nepal and India. I think India is gonna fall short, but Nepal might be going through. So yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about Nepal for a second. You're going to Nepal. It's a very remote location. You're not going to be able to bring a ton of stuff. Right now, are you already planning in your head types of stories that you want to tell with your photos? Or are you more of the photographer who shows up and says, let's see what happens, and then I'll just follow it and see where it goes?
Oh, that's a good question, because what I discovered is that my travels are also made up of a lot of photos I might have seen in the past from magazines, like travel magazines, books, whatever. And so when I imagine a place, I imagine that place through those images most of
Mm.
the time. So if you want to play a game, book a ticket for a place and never look what it looks like before. That's a good game. If you're going to a place like Nepal, which is fairly well known, yet few people have been there, I want to do two things when I go there. There's like those bucket list shots that I really want to get. For
Hmm.
example, those flags in the wind on the mountains,
Yes.
with the Himalayas in the background. So, and maybe the monks also, if I have access and if they're cool with that, trying to get a little bit of that culture. But also from my friends who spend quite some time there, I also want to have an element of surprise. So I want to be in the streets or the villages and just like stay up and just observe what happens and capture what I think is worth, not worth, everything's worth it, but in a way it's like it's something I want to share with the rest of the world.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh, and the last one, sorry. And the last one is, how can I integrate myself into those locations so that I also have a personal souvenir?
How can you integrate yourself in the location so that you have a as in like a like taking a photo of yourself in these locations as well?
Yeah. for
That's a
example.
cool idea. That's one thing that I definitely don't do enough of. I spend all of my time behind the camera. I
Because
focus.
it's the easiest, right? The
Well,
moment you have to be in front of it, you're like, oh, I'm gonna set
no,
up that
I think
one.
for me, it's I don't want to say that I'm a control freak, but having more knowledge of photography than say my wife or my children, it's like if I hand them the camera, I know that I'm not going to be happy with whatever photo that they
Oh,
take.
but
You know?
you can use your tripod, you set it up perfectly, and then you
Yeah,
get in your frame.
yeah. I'm gonna have
Okay,
to do more
fine.
of that.
It's not gonna look as genuine as if you had a really good photographer friend capture shots of
Yeah.
you in the
Hmm.
action. But uh, to be honest, try it out because in 50 years you'll be happy to have those shots. You'll be like,
Yeah.
oh wow, that was me there. That's so funny. Look at me. I had the beard, or I had no beard.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, oh cool.
I still had glasses. We hadn't figured out how to solve everybody's eye problems with a
Right.
pill or something. That's hilarious. Yeah, I'm really excited to see more photos. I'm sure that you're going to be making videos in Nepal. I'm really excited to see that as
Yeah.
that's definitely one of the places that is if I could travel anywhere in the world, I would love to do
Mm.
that. I don't know if this would help you at all, but maybe it would. But I recently asked the audience of the Beginner Photography podcast if they could take their camera anywhere in the world, where would it be? And there was a good range of options, but I would say
Yeah.
overwhelmingly people said Alaska. People want to go to
Really?
Alaska. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that. Like one of my Aaron just went to
Oh, okay.
Alaska,
Oh,
and he
really?
was like, "Dude, it's so crazy there. Like, it's so beautiful. Like the nature everywhere. Blah blah blah."
Yeah.
I was like, "Wow." So I can see why.
Yeah, well, there you go. There's a location for one of your next series of videos. That's gonna be great. So,
Right?
speaking of traveling to these locations, going to Nepal, it's very remote. You might not have internet access for periods of time. What do you do about keeping your actual photos safe?
Oh, that's really important. Very
Yeah.
important. So back when we were on the world tour, I had 3 hard drives. Two normal hard drives, let's say like the cheap ones, I had 2 4 terabyte hard drives or two terabytes, and those would be duplicates.
Hmm.
So whenever I would be done with the shoot, I would transfer everything into one hard drive and then duplicate it onto the other one at all times. And during that world tour, I had ended up with like 4 times 4 terabytes. So that was like 12 terabytes, 3 times 4. And then I had 3 hard drives crash. So
Oh,
if I
wow.
didn't duplicate those hard drives, I would have had come home with 0.
Oh,
So that's what I tell to everyone. Number one, make sure you always carry duplicates and don't put those in the same bag. If you can, separate bag, or better, give it to your wife or your friend. Now, nowadays, do not buy old school hard drive, invest in SSDs because they will be shock proof just by just how it's made and how it works. It's shock proof, so you don't have to worry about banging it and losing everything because the reading head like moved or whatever, and you're completely safe. But always just duplicate, and if you want, just send it to the cloud if you have internet. Otherwise, use devices like I use a Knobbox, for example, which
hmm.
is really cool, especially when I don't have my laptop and I don't want to take it. Just drop the memory card, do a backup on the Knobbox, and if I have an extra hard drive, I do an extra backup into the other hard drive. And if I want to be extra cautious, then I keep that memory card into a different spot and I don't use it until I'm back home or in a secure location.
Oh, gotcha.
So
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 you
that I have
never
three.
wipe a card while
It
you're
depends
traveling.
on the job. It depends. If I'm shooting for myself, I might. But if I'm shooting something very important on like some like portfolio worth shots,
Hmm.
or I'm working for other people, I want to have like three backups if I can. Like the
Gotcha.
memory card takes no space. You just buy another one. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. For some reason, I feel so many new photographers get hung up on memory cards and I don't know, keeping multiples, and it's like just buy another one. It's like $30.
I know.
It's
It's
like thirty
like,
dollars.
oh, I have all my shots in 2016 on it. I'm like, what? I'm like, what
That
do
is
you
gonna
mean?
die any moment. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah. And
know,
that's it.
right? He's like, no, no, oh no, those are for my wife. I'm like, what?
I've yeah, I know there's so many horror stories of people who
Mm-hmm.
Recently, actually, one of my wife's friends, her car got broken into, and they stole her camera out of the car. Now, she
Ooh.
wasn't like a photographer or anything, but she had this camera, and she bought like it was probably like a 128 gig card or whatever. So she
Yeah.
had photos of her child's birth on this card, and her child is like now 4 years old. So every photo that she had ever taken
Wow.
was on this card in the past 4 years. And you feel bad for those people in those situations.
Yeah.
Maybe there's just not enough education for non-photographers. But yeah, that I mean, you just think about that. That's a horrible
But
situation to
that's
be in.
where you can ask yourself, why do people buy cameras if they never take them off their camera? Right.
Well, I think it was that she'd like she'd probably take the card out of her camera, put it in her computer, pick the one or two photos that she liked from a birthday
Mm,
party or whatever, upload it to Facebook, take out the card, put it right back in the camera, and then that would be
got
it.
it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there was no cataloging of photos, and ultimately that was the problem. That was the problem, which is really sad. So when you get say back home base,
Yeah.
now you have all these hard drives full of photos and video. What do you do? What do you do with those?
Nowadays, because I'm using the Gnawbox, I actually pre-call all the images. I rate them before
Hmm.
I get home, like on the flight or something like that. But let's say I just came home, didn't rate them, or I didn't even have time to look at anything. I would just like go through, let's say, the 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 photos and just rate them and see which one I would keep and which one I would not keep. And once I know which one I keep, I just like import those into Lightroom, and the rest I would just like leave it out into a folder that I would delete a little bit later once I'm done working on the project, just to make sure in case I need to go back to it, I would. Or if I feel really confident, which I don't recommend to anyone, because that's when you feel very confident that something happens. You're like,
Always.
damn it,
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was a time lapse and that was the last frame. And yeah, so that happens. And then you just go back to working on those photos, and once you're done and you know you have everything you wanted, you just delete the rest.
Okay, okay, gotcha. So you're not the kind of photographer who keeps every raw that you've ever taken. You just keep what you used,
Yeah.
what was good enough, and then ditch the rest.
No, I don't keep everything. It would be mental.
Right.
Yeah,
I know.
especially because I have an easy shutter. So
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's very easy to go out and in an hour take 1,000 or so photos. No, I'm the same way. When it comes to weddings, it's like I only keep after 6 months after the
yeah.
wedding. I only keep what it was that I used, and then I just trash all the other photos because.
So what I did for weddings, and I would set myself like a year,
Hmm.
and I would take all those photos I did that didn't make it through selection,
Hmm.
and I would dump them into a hard drive called rejects, and dump all those photos in there and keep it for a year, and after just erase that folder after a year or so, and make space for another one. The reason was that sometimes you have clients who are not happy or want to see their grandma or their aunt or something that you did not include in your called photos, and they're like, oh, do you have that? And if you say no, well, I mean, yeah, it doesn't look good as a pro. So as a pro, I would always keep those for a year, and usually after a year, you're safe. Like if they
Yeah,
say
if they
anything,
didn't
you're
look at
like,
those
dude,
photos within a
dude, it's
year.
been a year. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Did you forget about your aunt for that entire year? Like now's the time that you're coming back for us? That's hilarious. As somebody who shoots a lot of travel photos, who you talk to a lot of other photographers who are interested in travel photography, I'm sure that you see a lot of photos from amateur travel photographers. What is something that most people get wrong about their travel photography when they're documenting their own travels?
Um, I don't know if it's just about travel photography, but I felt like it's more for any kind of photography, and it's timing.
Hmm.
And that comes down to two aspects, like finding the good light for like time of the day. For example, like if you're not dedicated, you'll probably go out at like 11 a.m. after the strong night or whatever, and then you'll come back home before sunset because you're tired. But if you want to be good, or if you want to get shots that are a little bit more worth it, you're gonna be chasing light, just like Netflix. And so you want to be out there like sunrise or early morning hours, and then also evening and maybe nighttime, so you get different ambience. So I think not everyone's ready to put that dedication. A lot of people are just like, I don't understand why I don't get those photos. Well, maybe because you're not there at the same time, you know. And the last one is just taking time to get your composition right, and not rushing or like feeling like someone's going to attack you if you take a photo. Meaning like no one cares if you take a minute in the middle of a busy road to take the right photo with your
Yeah.
right composition. Like there are crazy people everywhere, just be one of them, you know. And that's it, just get over with it.
There are crazy people everywhere. Just be one of them. I love that. That's great. It's going to be definitely the most memorable quote of this interview right here. My last question here for you: what is something that you think that people would be surprised to find out about being a travel photographer?
Hmm. um a lot of time on the laptop, but it's uh it's a lot of time trying to either find, if you want, partners, or spending time, like the business part, if you want, takes a lot more time sometimes than being on location. And once you're on location, especially for me, if I'm doing YouTube, it gets very, very intense, where I have to think about the photos, I have to think about the video, and it's not leisure at all. It
Yeah.
is not like, oh nice, I'm waking up, let's go shoot for 5 minutes. No, it's more like I just went to New York, and my schedule was like 10 a.m. midnight every day, certain days sunrise until 10 p.m. So it's like being out there at all times, trying to um, get as much content as possible, or the right content, and make sure you maximize that opportunity. I will say, if you don't like that, just slow travel. But then you gotta have flexibility. Just spend a month in the country or 2 months, and take your time if that's more suitable for someone.
Travel doesn't always equal leisure. That's perfect.
Yeah, no, no. But since I love what I do, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like I get excited waking up for sunrise, and going to do something. It's not easy to wake up, but I'm excited. So it's
I
like,
know. Yeah.
yeah. It's and then your alarm rings, and you're like, oh.
You
And
went to
five
bed
minutes
4
later,
hours
once you're
ago.
out, you're like, yes.
Yeah. 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 It really just comes down to, like, I guess people's definition of, what travel is and what it is that they
Yeah.
want out of it. As I know, maybe this is a mostly American construct. I just simply don't know. But I know a lot of times when it comes to travel, you're thinking of like, oh, I gotta relax. Like, this is a vacation. Like this is my
Yeah.
time away from my job, and this lets me kind of recoup. But I think when you get out of that headspace, and when you use, I know me personally, I work better. Like, I have a very hard time just turning off. I have a
Yeah.
very hard time just sitting there and just doing nothing. And that having some sort of goal, whether it be to capture a certain sort of shot, or to make a video or something, definitely makes travel or vacations for me a lot more enjoyable. But I've also never, excuse me, had to go around the world and create like
Yeah.
consistent content. And I can imagine that schedule of shooting, editing, uploading has just got to be tedious, and very difficult to keep up with. So I just have to congratulate you, obviously, on doing that, on doing it very well. Growing your YouTube channel as well. It's been very fun to watch you and your growth, and I look forward to seeing you and your growth in the future as well. As I know that great things are to come. But for those who maybe this is their first time hearing of you, can you let the listeners know where they can find you online and where they can follow along with your work?
Sure. You can find me online everywhere at Pierre T. Lambert. So that's spelled out PierrerretLambert. So if you type my name on YouTube, or if you type Instagram, TikTok, wherever you want, you will find it. You can also go to pierretlambert.com. You'll find, what are you going to find there? Some photos, but mainly, if I'm honest, I think it's going to be presets, probably, maybe a cheat sheet, some gear list, and the workshop over 30 days for whoever wants to learn. Yeah.
Great, great. Again, Pierre, I have to thank you so much for coming on, sharing everything that you did. I had a blast talking with you. It's clear that your personality is exactly as it is on your YouTube videos. And again, I had a great time, and thank you again for sharing everything that you did.
Thank you, Roman.
Oh, Pierre, if you are listening right now, you are a gem, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing all of that awesome information. It is so fascinating, I think, to hear of photographers who, first of all, to be a photographer, to be a professional photographer, to make money as a photographer, to make your living as a photographer is one thing, and it is a very hard thing. But to be able to not only not come from a photography background, but to do it in the niche of travel and adventure photography is incredible. So hearing your story and how you got there, all the obstacles that you find and overcome and challenge was amazing to listen to. So again, Pierre, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show and talking about everything that you did. So I would love to hear your takeaways from this episode with Pierre. And you can do that over in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. And guess what? I have some information that I am super excited to talk about right now. If you are following the Beginner Photography Podcast on Facebook, then you already know that this past week I have been doing a week's worth of Facebook Lives. We're doing challenges, we're doing fun stuff because, hey, if we're stuck at home, I want you to come out of the other side of this pandemic a better photographer than you are today. Just because you're stuck inside or in your home or whatever the case is, that does not mean that you cannot practice your photography and build your skills. There is so much that we can do inside of our homes or around our homes. And that is what I'm talking about in these Facebook Lives. I'm giving you challenges. These are quick 5-minute photo challenges. Things like taking a self-portrait. I walk you through how to do it. I show you my process of how I take my own self-portrait, how to capture clean lines, shadows, right? All of these things that we have, everybody has access to in their home. I'm not talking about, we're not going crazy. I want to give you no excuses to not participate in these challenges. So if you want to be a part of it, if you want to come join me live Monday through Friday for the foreseeable future, because I want to build a community around this. I want to hang out with you guys. There's already a community in the group, so let's hang out together. Let's talk photography. Let's do this live. I'll even answer your questions if you got them. So come and join me. And you can do that by liking the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook page. And that, again, is where I go live every single weekday. And I actually hadn't come up with a set time every single day, but I will for this. Let's see. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Time is at 11, and then we got 2. So 11 and 2. Let's do 1 o'clock. So we're gonna do every day this week, and let's see, what time is that episode? At 1 o'clock. Ooh. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna do Facebook Live every day for the foreseeable future at 1 p.m. So that'll be definitely all of April. Come join me throughout all of April, 1 p.m. live, the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook page, not the group, the page. Come join me live. We're going to be talking photography. I'm going to give you challenges. We're going to get into this. We're going to learn. We're going to grow. As I said, come out on the other side of this thing a better photographer than we went into it. Do not let this stop you from creating, from taking photographs. So again, join me. I'm going to have a link in the show notes. If you can't, just go to Facebook and search for Beginner Photography Podcast. You can just get into the show notes, find that link, click it, join it. I'll see you there. That's it. Until next week, I want you to do more. And I want you to make do. Sorry, I got that mixed up. I want you to make do. I want you to make more. I want you to do more. And I want you to make do with the gear that you got and the situation that you got, because I promise you that it is still better than you think. I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.